I'm Andrea Martone. I'm the Director of Communications for Sailor Freedom. And today I'm speaking with Dr. Q, as we call him, specializes in the healing of his clients' emotional wounds and using trauma resolution methods. And his practice has also provided therapy support for survivors of sex trafficking victims through Sailor Freedom. Your trauma resolution treatment, otherwise known as TRT, is designed to help people heal without having to relive traumatic memories. How does that approach benefit survivors of child abuse and sex trafficking who may already be carrying overwhelmingly fear, shame, or emotional pain?
So, Andrea, thank you, and I'm glad to be here. I think the first thing that we want to understand is why do those emotional injuries, why do those emotional wounds not heal? Right? If I broke my foot when I was 12 years old and I told you about it now, and I was as emotional as when it first happened, you're going to look at me like I'm crazy. This guy is fine. He walks all over the place. His foot is okay. However, if I told you about what my uncle did to me when I was 12 and I started to get emotional, you'd be like, well, duh, of course. But why? Why does the physical wound heal and the emotional one doesn't, even though we have the saying, time heals all wounds? And so what we discovered in working with, hundreds and hundreds of survivors is the reason that the emotional wound hasn't healed isn't because it can't. It's because when it happened, it short circuited the emotional part of the brain, which means there's an aspect of the brain, not the entirety, but an aspect that doesn't know the awful moment or moments ever ended. They're stuck on a perpetual loop. So instead of the old methodologies of therapy, which is helping the person dig it up, process, and get it out, we have a much gentler process that's all about getting the good news in to the part of the brain that doesn't know it's over. Think of it more as unplugging the memory so that emotionally the brain experiences it as information. As soon as that happens, the pain that was attached to it gets discharged, it goes away. And then what the person knows where they're logical, they begin to feel it also emotionally. Because lots of us can understand that that abuse that I went through when I was 12 was not my fault. And I know that, but I don't feel different. So that's the process and how it benefits our survivors or individuals who have experienced childhood abuse or sexual violence or molestation is one, they don't have to relive those worst moments to get it better. And two, once we've unplugged it, the pain is gone and doesn't reactivate in them. So they get to have like a permanent freedom from the effect that that stuff has had.
TRT has been described by many of our survivors who have experienced it as both compassionate and empowering. So, how does this method align with the broader continuum of aftercare for sex trafficking survivors, particularly in helping them to reintegrate into life, relationships, and
Yeah.
meaningful community engagement?
Yeah. So it is a much gentler and empowering approach because the survivor gets to get freedom from the effect that the stuff has had. And so think of it that when we go through troubling moments or experiences or awful things that have happened, traumas, when it short circuits the brain, it creates a bad program that runs. And that program then creates a lot of glitches and malfunctions in how I currently interact with the world. When you heal or unplug the effect that those things have had, now the person is what we call much more uptime and emotionally present, which means they're dealing with what's happening without the emotional effect of what has. They're able to see things more clearly for what they are, and they have more distance. And then the third part that's really dramatically different is they're no longer experiencing emotionally other people's stuff as feeling like it means something about me. They're able to get it that it might be how that person is feeling or thinking, and maybe about something they said or didn't say or did or didn't do, but it's not making them feel bad about themselves. So they really get more space from other people's stuff, and those triggers no longer produce that same kind of response in them. So they're able to navigate their world much better.
The traditional therapy that most people are used to can take years and years of revisiting painful memories. Can you explain a moment or of transformation you've witnessed in one or more of your patients using your TRT that demonstrates how healing can happen more swiftly and gently?
Absolutely. So I think that the first thing that we want to understand is that, again, therapy is a wonderful tool for so many different things, but it's not the right tool for trauma. It's like physical therapy is really useful for a lot of ailments, but sometimes I need to have surgery. And so trauma resolution treatment is um, it works in conjunction with therapy, but it does something very different. We are able to unplug the effect. So, in a very short period of time, maybe in a few hours, we can have dramatic results that happen. I remember, I mean, there's hundreds of survivors that I've worked with, but let's think of this one gal who, when she was a kid, her stepdad was both verbally and physically abusive. She had a older brother's best friend that did, inappropriate sexual stuff to her when she was like 11 or 12. She wound up getting into bad circumstances with a boyfriend who was also violent and abusive. She wound up getting stuck on some substances, and she even got trafficked and had a horrific gang rape. And so, as we worked together, one of the things that we did is first we created, how do we want her to be when we're done, like an outcome of a her who's present and free and clear and light. And then what we did is we unplugged the effect that those moments have had. So she was no longer having any of the grief or the guilt or the shame or the regret or the remorse over what happened, to the point that she could in detail describe that horrific gang rape while being present and fully okay. No yuckiness going on, because for the first time, her brain was experiencing that awful experience as data about something that happened versus where it had been stuck in her as happening. Once that was unplugged, she's got freedom. She's no longer hurting. She's no longer feeling any of that self blame as if it was her fault, because that tends to go on when we go through troubling moments, is that it feels like I've done something to deserve that, or it was my fault in some way. And the last thing that's very different is those reminders. When she would drive by a hotel that had that name, or when she was at that particular time of day where it would trigger all sorts of disruption in her, that has completely stopped. She's literally now sleeping soundly through the night. She's no longer having night terrors. She's no longer distressed. Her brain is no longer confusing similar as same. She's much more okay and at peace, no longer hurting over what she went through. And
It's
we did that literally in a few hours.
truly amazing. Truly, truly
Yeah, it's
progressive
remarkable, the
therapy.
change that
Progressive.
we can get to have happen for folks. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. And again, Many people are reluctant to go into therapy for their trauma because they know it could last for years. And sometimes therapists require them to come in 2, 3 times a week. So not only is it a financial burden if they don't have health care coverage, but it's
Yes.
time. It's time and having patience to get through their trauma. And this is a big breakthrough for them in a
Yeah.
short period of time.
Yeah. And that's the other reversal is in therapy, it tends to be looked at that it's the client's job to do the work to get it better for themselves. In this process, trauma resolution treatment, it's not the client's job, it's the therapist's job to get it better for the client. If the client knew how to get that better, they wouldn't be talking to us. They're not choosing those kinds of emotional responses or those kinds of things to get triggered by. It's unconscious, it's automatic, and it's only happening because part of the brain doesn't know the awful moment ended. And that's the major difference. Instead of I'm troubled because of how bad it was, which is the conventional wisdom, what if you're only troubled because there's a small aspect of your brain that never got that it's over, finished, you survived it, you made it through it, you're okay. So therefore, it's a lot simpler to get the good news in to that part of the brain rather than try to process and get all of the yuck out. Because even when I do that, like throwing up, I do feel a little bit better, but I still get triggered by the same things. When you get the good news in and the brain reads it as information, that part's done. In the same way, when somebody gets that Santa Claus is make believe, they can't go back to believing in him. When the brain gets that I survived it, I made it through it, it's over and I'm okay, it doesn't reactivate again.
You've made some excellent analogies here, analogies that everybody can understand very clearly. I thank you. Which
Yeah,
leads me to the last question in this interview. What would,
sure.
what would you want families, advocates, and community members who are watching this video to understand about trauma recovery so they can better support victims of child abuse and sex trafficking without unintentionally causing more harm?
So I would say a few different pieces. One, I would like all of us to consider that maybe we all have at least a little bit of post traumatic stress. I don't think that you can go through the human experience and have not experienced awful things along the way. Some people in bigger ways than others, and some people in more ways than others, but we all have a little bit of it. Second, we want to not think of post traumatic stress disorder as a disorder. We want to think of it as an injury because injuries can heal. A disorder is something I would have to manage for the rest of my life. An injury heals. And so trauma is an injury that heals. Third, that everybody's behavior makes sense to them or they wouldn't do it. And from that trauma informed lens, it's never what's wrong with you, it's always what happened to you. So, as we're working with people who have had some form of childhood sexual violence, they've had a molestation, they've had a horrific experience, we want to be understanding that it's what happened to them, not what's wrong with them. And therefore, their behavior makes sense to them or they wouldn't do it based on what happened to them. And then the last part is there are ways that we can get those kinds of injuries healed in a way that doesn't require a lot of effort on their part, doesn't take a long period of time, can be done in a gentle and empowering way so that the person gets to get freedom from the effect that those things have continued to have on their brain.
Thank you so much. You have been extremely helpful to the viewers and to me as well. And more important, on behalf of Sailor Freedom, we want to thank you for all the work that you have done to help rehabilitate the survivors. God bless you.
Well, thank you. It's a true privilege and honor to be able to work with the survivors at Sailor Freedom. It's been a amazing experience for me. These women are so strong, so powerful, so resilient, so brave, and it's so cool to see them really live in to who they really are. When those wounds get out of the way, they open up and really get to be the dynamic woman they always were, but now are free to be.
Well said. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.